Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and in this video we are going to build the entire Pong game from scratch in about 20 minutes. We'll try to make it as quick as possible. So let's get into it. First, here on the assignment description, you can see that I have a couple of links to things. Right? It says follow along to this video, to learn how to make Pong. When you're finished, upload your entire project folder here for credit. We will talk about how to do that once I'm done. So here are the resources for the project. We're going to get these Pong resources here. I'm going to just click on it and it will download that folder onto my computer. Now notice it downloaded it as an extract or as a compressed folder. So what I need to do is extract all of these resources onto a place where I can get access to them. So in my case, I'm just going to put them on my desktop and click extract. So now I have my Pong resources folder right here on my desktop. I have some CS files, I have some artwork, some more CS files. The CS files, by the way, are scripts. I'm going to give you the script that you need in order to make the game work. Okay, so now that I have my Pong resources extracted, I can go ahead and close all this stuff out. And now I want to open up a new project in Unity. Now, for projects after this, I won't actually go through this first step where I create a new project and open it all the way up in Unity and all that stuff. I'm just doing it in this video so that you can see the exact steps you need to take in order to complete this assignment. Okay, so I have the Unity Hub open. Now I want to create a new project in Unity. So I'm going to click this blue New button. But first, I want to make sure I'm signed into my account. So if I go over here and click, I can see that I'm signed into my account. I'm going to click New. Now you need to be signed into your Unity account in order to make this work. So you're going to want to come over here, click there, and then sign into your Unity account. If you don't have one, here's what we can do. Go sign in. You can sign in. You can create one based on your Utah Military Academy email address. All right. Okay. So once we get the new game project dialog with this thing right here, now we want to make a couple of choices here. First, I want to choose 2D. This is a 2D game, right? And we're only making 2D games in this class. If you want to make 3D games, join my Game Development 2 class. So this is a 2D game. I'm going to click 2D. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call this Pong Ultimate because I already have a Pong project in this folder. Now on my computer, I have a special drive that is specifically only for all my video game design projects. It's like a 2 terabyte drive and I store all my game design work on that drive. So I have my stuff going to that drive. If you want your project going somewhere other than the basic default location, make sure you indicate it in this step because it's about to build all these files and put them in the place you indicate. So it's important that you put it in a place you want it to go. So I'm going to click create. Now it's going to look like nothing's happening. For quite a while, it's going to look like nothing's happening. I might get a little bit of a indicator on my cursor that something's happening, but for a while, it's going to be really hard for us to tell if anything's happening. Unity opened up, good. And now it's going to have this very slow progress bar. That's going to take a really long time to open my project. You'll see why we don't do this on every video after this. I'm going to already have the project fully open and ready to go because this is a long process. So in the meantime, let's talk a bit about that Unity video that you just watched, introduction. So let's do a little bit of review while we're waiting for this to open up. So in Unity, it is a 2D and 3D game development platform. In Unity, you use things called sprites to design objects, and those objects do things on your screen, right? You indicate what those objects do using a script or programming, right? We write some code and it creates a script, and that script tells the thing how to behave. all of your objects are stored in a panel called the hierarchy. If you click on an object in the hierarchy, then you can see all of the options you have for that object, including components you can attach to it and things you can change about each component in a panel called the inspector. All of your files are stored in a panel called assets. And this is taking too long. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. I'll come back when it's done. Okay, and we're back. So this is my empty project in Unity. So over here we have the hierarchy where we store our game objects. Down here we have our assets where we store all of our files that we're going to use. Over here we have the inspector. If I click on the main camera, you can see that I have some options that I can manipulate as they pertain to the main camera. For example, the main camera has a blue background right now. If I were to play my game, I would see this blue background. Now, I don't know about you, but every version of Pong I've ever played has a black background. So, here's what we need to do. If we go over here, we can choose background, and we can change the background color. I'm going to make it super black. Okay, game's done, right? We're finished? No, we have a lot more to do. First thing we need to do is import our assets. So here in our assets folder, we can see that we have assets. Then inside the assets folder, we have a folder called scenes. And inside the scenes, we have a file called sample scene. Well, this is really just the scene that we have open right now. Notice that it's sample scene up here. I can rename this file if I want, rename the scene, which I'm going to do right now. I'm going to right click and rename it and just call it main. The following open scenes have been changed on disk. Do you want to reload the scene? Sure. So it's going to reload my scene with a new name. So I have a main scene. Let's go back up to the assets folder. There are a couple things we're going to bring into this to this game. Primarily, we're going to bring in scripts and sprites. Now, a script is basically just a bunch of code that makes my object do things. A sprite is like a design that we place on the object so that it can look a certain way. So let's bring in our sprites first. I'm going to right click down here, pretty much wherever there's an open space. I'm going to go over to create and folder, and I'm going to type the word sprites and hit enter. Now I need to import my sprites into this folder. Let's open it up. Here's a cool thing about Unity. I can just kind of push this off to the side, find my Pong resources folder here, open it up, and just drag all of the sprites out of it, right? So that's a sprite. This is a sprite. That's a sprite. This is a sprite. And that's a sprite. Okay. Now here in Unity, I can see that I have a ball, a dotted line, a racket, a horizontal wall, and a vertical wall. That's all the artwork I need for this game, believe it or not. I'm going to go back up to my assets folder. Oh, hold on. You guys didn't see any of that because my big old face was in the way. Check it out. So those are the things that I have. Sorry. Ball, dotted line, racket, horizontal, and vertical walls. All right, let's go back up to my assets folder. The other kind of asset I'm bringing into this game are scripts. Scripts. S-C-R-I-P-T-S. Scripts. And inside the scripts folder, I'm going to drop this ball.cs script and this moveracket.cs script. Okay. Let me go ahead and maximize. Now, these files, these scripts, are indicated with this hashtag or this octothorpe or this pound sign, whatever you want to call it. That is because the language I'm using for these scripts is C#. And if I click on one of these scripts, we can see over here the actual programming that I wrote to make this game behave the way it's supposed to behave. Same thing over here with the ball. All right, so we have our sprites and our scripts. So let's build our actual level. I'm going to go over here to the horizontal wall, and I want to take a look at some of the options. Let me slide this over here. I want to take a look at some of the options I have available here in the inspector. So over here I have texture type, sprite mode, all this stuff. This is an important measurement right here. This says pixels per unit. Let me see if I can turn on. Sorry, I don't really have my grid on right now. Okay, I have a grid. Maybe it's in preferences. I turned off my grid at some point, and I kind of forgot how to turn it back on. Weird. Is it over here? Anyway, I turned it off somehow. Oh yeah, right here. I want to see. Okay, there we go. Found it. And actually, I'm going to turn the opacity up just a bit. Okay, every box in my grid is essentially called a unit. So this right here is a unit, this is a unit, that's a unit, that's a unit, right? And over here, we have this option called pixels per unit, meaning how many pixels do I want to represent by one unit? Now, for our game, these, art assets, if I were to bring them out like that, notice that it's really, really tiny, right? That's not going to work for our game, right? So what we can do, let's delete that. Instead of just scaling it up, we can actually change this pixels per unit so that it matches the right amount, basically the right size. Yeah, let's apply. Now that's a little bit too big, but that's okay because we can resize our camera. Now, there's actually some other things I want to do, so let me change those things first. So pixels per unit, we're going to set it to 1. Let's see, mesh type, that's fine. Right down here, filter mode. Okay. This is important. All the games that we make in this class are going to be pixelated games, meaning they're going to be pixels, right? I want to make sure that my Unity isn't trying to alias my pixels, meaning isn't trying to smooth them out in some way. I want them to be stark. I want there to be no filter on these whatsoever. In this game, it's not going to be as easy to see the effect of that, but once we get into it, I promise you, you're going to want to turn off the filter. So just get into the habit of turning off the filter. So now that that is great, now that those settings are set up, I'm going to bring out 2 versions of my horizontal wall. All right. I'm going to do the same thing for vertical wall. I'm going to set it to pixels per unit to 1 and turn off the filter and apply. I'm going to bring out 2 versions of my vertical wall. Now, these aren't in the right spaces. They don't look great. So what we're going to do is we're going to start kind of pushing them to where we want them to go. I'm going to use, you're going to accidentally do that. Every time you make an accident, it's okay because you can hit Control Z to bring it back. I'm going to grab my move tool. I'm going to move it roughly about, you know what we're going to do first? I'm actually going to put these on 0 on the y-axis. So remember in math class, the x-axis is the horizontal, the y is the vertical. If I put these vertical walls on 0 on the y-axis, then they'll be exactly in the middle of my thing. So I'm going to go over here to the y under position, and I'm going to hit 0. And then it puts it right at 0. I'm going to do the same thing with this guy. 0. Okay. Now for these, I want them at 0 on the x-axis. And then what I want to do is I want to just kind of start pushing these out and up until they get to right about the point I want them to be. Okay, that's good. That's good. Okay, that looks pretty good. So that's the outside of my game. Now, one problem you're going to notice, my camera is really, really short, right? So actually all I need to do is come into camera and change its size until the camera encompasses the entire play space. And for some reason my camera is not black. All right, beautiful. Okay, so now I have basically a game space, but I need to do something to these walls. These walls need to be able to contain the ball as it flies around the screen. What we need to do is add something called a collider. Now the walls right now are basically just artwork in my game. There's nothing to stop these objects from passing through the walls. So when I add a collider, it's going to basically make it a solid object and make it so that objects cannot pass through it. So I'm going to select all of my walls so I can do this all to them at once. Come over here and click Add Component. And I'm going to type Collider. So I'm looking for Box Collider 2D because these are all box-shaped objects. So I'm going to click that. Now you may not have noticed, but if you look very closely, you can see a faint green outline around each of my wall sections. That is showing me, sorry, I'm just tweaking my wall section here. That is showing me that these all have colliders, right? So any solid object that also has a collider won't be able to pass through those walls. Okay, now let's set up the middle of our level. That's going to be this dotted line object. So I'm going to come in here, change it pixels per unit to 1, turn off the filter, hit apply, and just bring that out. Okay, put it roughly in the middle. I'm actually going to make it 0 on the X and 0 on the Y, so it's directly in the middle. Now I don't want a collider around this object because I do want my ball to be able to pass through it, right? So that's just going to be decoration on my screen. Okay, next I want to create a racket. So I'm going to, first I have to change my sprite settings. So I'm going to change this to pixels per unit 1, turn off the filter, hit apply, and then bring a racket out into the game space. And I'll put it right about there. That looks like a good space. Now, a couple things I need for my racket. One, I need my racket to have a collider, meaning I need my racket to be able to reflect solid objects, right? I don't want my ball to pass right through my racket. So I'm going to click Add Component, add a box collider. Then I need my racket to be able to move in the game. Now the walls don't move, right? The walls stay exactly where they are, but I need my racket to be able to move. So for this, we need an object called a rigid body 2D. A rigid body essentially just makes my object able to move in physical space. So I'm going to type in the search bar here, rigid body 2D. Now, if I look at some of the options I have available for this rigid body 2D, I can see that I have some things that maybe you might recognize. Mass, linear drag, angular drag, gravity scale. Watch what happens if I leave gravity scale at 1 and I play my game. See that? My paddle fell to the bottom of the level, which is not what I want. And I'm noticing that there's a little bit of issues with my edges, but I'll leave them alone. So I don't want my paddle to be affected by gravity because I want my player to be able to move my paddle. So I'm going to change my gravity scale to 0. Here's another thing that I want to make sure I do. Down here, there's an option called constraints. I'm going to click that. And I want to freeze my rotation. So I'm going to click freeze rotation on the Z-axis. What this means is that my racket will not be able to rotate. If you don't do that when you're playing the game, you'll see the ball hit the racket and the racket will rotate and then it's on an angle for the rest of the game. That's not what we want, right? So I want my racket to be able to rotate. Now the last thing I want is I want a script that can tell my racket how to behave, okay? So all my scripts they're held in my scripts folder, and I have a move racket script and a ball script. So the move racket script is what we want to attach to the racket. So we're going to grab it and we're just going to drag it up and just drop it right on our racket object. And we can see down here that it has attached itself to our racket, and now we have some options. So for these, I have speed, meaning how fast do I want the racket to be able to move, and axis. The axis is what controls are we going to use for this racket specifically. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And I'm using the W and the D key to go up and down. I'm moving at 30, which is pretty good speed. And I'm moving up and down. I cannot move left or right. I can only move up and down, which is exactly what I'm looking for. So that's what player one looks like. Okay. So now that I have a racket that works, I'm going to right click on racket, click duplicate, and then drag my new racket over here. Now this new racket is going to be player 2. Now player 2 is controlled by the same buttons as player 1. Right now, we're about to fix that problem. So notice when I select player 2 and I go down to the script, I have this axis option. What this is referring to is basically control axes in Unity. If I go to edit and I go to preferences, I will see that I have, no, not preferences. Edit, project settings. There we go. And if I go to input manager, I will see that I have this option called axes. I have a vertical axis, a horizontal axis, fire 1, fire 2, fire 3, all this stuff. This is basically the control scheme for my game. So if I want the player to be able to jump, I can tie that to the space button, and whenever they hit space, they jump, right? For us right now, the control scheme that's controlling the paddles is up and down and S and W. We were using S and W to control our paddle. So I'm actually going to delete all of this, and I'm going to set the negative button here as S and the positive button as W, because I only want player 1 to be able to play with S and W. And instead of vertical, I'm going to call this vertical 1. Now I want to create a new axis, or actually, because we don't need a horizontal, let's go ahead and just change horizontal to vertical 2. And I am going to get rid of all of these inputs as well. And I will set vertical 2 to be, let's say, L and O. Or maybe we want up, down, or up arrow and left arrow, or down arrow and left arrow. So let's do down, up. Let's change it to that. That'll work. That's a more comfortable scheme. So now we have player 1 on S and W, and we have player 2 on down and up. Okay, so then over here I can indicate that this racket is going to be player 2 by changing it to vertical 2. Now remember, we changed our axis for player 1, so we need to go back to player 1 and change this from vertical to vertical 1. Now let's test it out and see if our rackets can move independently. So vertical 1 will work and vertical 2 works. And so now we have a 2-player game of Pong. But we also need the ball to go back and forth, right? So let's create our ball. This is actually pretty easy. Let's go back to our sprites. Let's find our ball sprite. Change it, pixels per unit, to 1. Turn off the filter and click apply. Then we can drag our ball out into the game space. Now, a couple things we need. We need a collider, and we need a rigid body 2D. I'm going to bring in the 2D first. So the rigid body 2D, I'm going to turn the gravity scale off. I'm going to freeze its rotation. I'm also going to set its mass to very, very low, the lowest setting possible. Here's why. I don't want my ball to be able to push my paddles out of the way. The more mass it has and the more velocity it has, the more likely it is to push paddles out of the way. So I'm going to turn the mass down very, very low. All right, let's add a collider. Let's do a box collider. Okay, so now my ball has a box collider and it can move around in 3D space. Now the last thing, there are two more things I need to do and then we'll be finished. The first thing I need to do is here, I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call this materials. All right. Inside here, we're going to create something new. We're going to create a physics material. I want my ball to be able to bounce off of objects, okay, and maintain its angle of reflection while it's bouncing. And I want it to have no friction whatsoever. So in order to do that, I can apply a physics material to the ball itself. So I'm going to create a new physics material 2D. I'm going to call this ball. And when I select this material, notice that I have two options. I have friction and bounciness. Friction is going to be 0. Bounciness is going to be 1. I'm going to select my ball and drag my material over into the, let's do the collider. Okay. All right. So that's the physics material. Next, I want to bring in my ball script. Now, if I look at my ball script over here, I can see that my script is based off of specific names for my racket. For example, if I collide with racket right, it's going to do some physics calculation to determine where I'm going to go. If it collides off of racket left, it's going to do another physics calculation to decide where to go. So I need to rename my rackets properly. So I'm going to choose my right racket. I'm going to rename it to racket right. Now to rename it, all I did was right click on it and choose rename. The left racket is going to be racket left, just like that. No spaces, capital R, capital L. All right, now I can choose my ball. I can grab my ball script and drop it right there on the ball. So now I have a ball script. I have my rackets. Now the ball is going to be the same speed as the paddles. Let's turn that down and see how that feels. Uh-oh. So my paddles aren't reflecting my ball properly. I may have flipped the left and right. So let's change that. Rename. So if that happens to you, then just change the names of your rackets. There we go. Now we've got the bounciness. Okay. And so my my ball is bouncing off of my rackets appropriately. And oh, hello. Hi. Okay, good. Now, you'll notice that we're not scoring any points or anything like that. That's okay. We don't need to get into all of that in this video. Right now, I just want to see that your game can actually work. Okay. Please let me know if you have any issues creating your project, building your project, and turning your project in. Okay. This was a long enough video. I will see you next time. Good luck.